It started with the Italians in what's called polyphonic music, when they learned how to play two or more notes simultaneously.
When was that?
That started in about the 1500s.
1500?
Yeah, the Italians were the ones that did most of this. With an Italian priest named Antonio Vivaldi.
Vivaldi.
Yeah, was the one that really pushed all before. But all of the Italian musicians, particularly Frescobaldi and Gabrielli, are two of them that developed the initial polyphonic music. And then Bach became the master of it. And then Handel was the great popularizer of it. So you Handel, Bach, Vivaldi, Gabrielli, and what was the other one? Gabrielli and Frescobaldi.
Luther? Martin Luther? No.
Martin Luther was the beginning. He wrote the initial pieces of music.
For the organ of the church.
Well, the initial, that was still the Pythagorean modal music.
So all this comes from Pythagoras?
Yeah, it all comes from Pythagoras.
The modal music, you call it? Modal.
Yeah, it's, the only pieces of it remain. It's called major and minor.
Major and minor?
Yeah, well, those are all part of what are called church modes.
Church modes.
Yeah, those are extensions from the original Pythagorean system, and they had the distortion factors. Bach finally distorted the whole thing and erased it and made it a pure logarithm. So music, from that point on, always sounded harsh. But that's the only way he could play in all keys. Otherwise, you had to retune the organ for every key you played. See, it didn't matter with the voice because you could move the frequency everywhere. There was a stringed instrument, but the organ is the first digital device. It's an analog computer, but it's a digital keyboard. So now you're stuck to discrete frequencies. So every key you have to retune the organ. The pipe organ is one of the oldest. And with all the stops and the pipes, it's an analog computer of incredible complexity. It's a waveform synthesizer.
And the organ is a waveform?
Yeah, they can't make them anymore. And the old ones are all the metal fatigue and everything. They're all rotten. It's all gone now.
They can't make them anymore?
They don't know how to make any of that stuff.
Are you serious?
It's too complicated. They couldn't do it. None of that can be duplicated. That was made by masters. They just did it all in their head. The guy that made organs with 20,000 pipes, you know how he measured the spectrum? He went into the church and took a stick and threw it on the ground and listened to the echoes, let that cook in his head, and build a 15,000 pipe organ out of it that resonated with the church. And there was no insurance back then. If you fucked up, your head got fed to the fish.
But no pressure, right?
It just simply worked. It wasn't even a question whether it was going to work, because if it didn't, you died.
So these masters that made the organ, that was it?
Silbermann made most of the great organs in Germany.
So who?
Silbermann.
Silbermann.
Yeah. And then, I don't know who made, France had their own brand. France made some incredible sounding organs, but they sounded different than the German organs. And then the English, had their organs and all that, and all of them are resonant, they're analog computers. You build waveforms by adding harmonics. You can make any kind of waveform you want. And the physical feeling of being in the churches when these things are running in full power is beyond description.
Really?
Particularly when all the planets are lined up.
Wow.
Scares the organist. The whole church sounds like it's going to come apart. The organists start to lose control. The whole thing gets wrapped up into the cosmic event.
This is the ultimate rave party.
And just goes wild. And it leaves the audience in complete shock. Thousands of people just like stunned in shock. They had a grand organ concert at Grace Cathedral in San Francisco right during the planetary alignment. That church was smart. They played that whole solar cycle, and they did a series of 12 organ concerts. Half of the music was Bach. And it got nearer and nearer the planetary alignment. The performances started becoming more and more stunning, and larger quantities of people started showing up. So finally, the last one, there's only one seat to sit in the whole church, where all the phases line up. We'd always get those seats beforehand, hours beforehand, and make sure they were reserved.
Your family?
No, me and David.
Oh, here?
Yeah, in San Francisco, David Franklin.
So they had an organ.
We were doing that whole Sonoma State study, and the organ concert series was in that exact sync with the solar flares. And of course, you were there at every one of those concerts, and they just lit that church up. We'd spend days preparing for these events, hiking around in the woods and just like living on fruits and vegetables. You had to take at least a 10-mile hike before the organ concert, and then get there at the top of that mountain, and then there's a couple other things you do, and you have your seats are all arranged right where all four organs, pipe organs, cross. In the cross of the church itself, they're all built like giant crosses, and they have four organs in them. They have the forward and reflected organs, the giant ones in front and back, and then they got the side organs, and there's two seats on either side of the aisle in the middle, and you get those seats, all the waves add up in that spot, and it produces, you go out of your body. You just go out, during the concert, you just go out of your body. You're not even in normal world anymore. The whole thing just completely overwhelms you. And you can actually see the music and the whole, but just in that one spot. So the grand concert, the church was too crowded, so they had to put everybody out in the main thing. But the organ concert built up so much power that the whole church went, right after the concert ended, the whole church went silent. There wasn't any applause. And the organists were like frozen, staring like with weird looks on their face at their keyboards. The whole place just like went dead. It was quiet. No one was clapping or anything. And then all of a sudden, all 1,000 people jumped up for a simultaneous standing ovation, like the church had never seen. It just blew everybody away.
How long was that standing ovation?
It was the concert went on for about 2 hours.
Wow.
And built with like one of Bach's most famous organ works, the horror movie one.
Toccata in Fugue?
D minor. Yeah, he wrote that when he was 18 years old. But I don't like that. It's juvenile and it's too dark and whatever. But these guys and the church and the alignment and the whole thing gave it a rendition of that piece of music that just wiped everybody out, including them. They lost control of the whole resonance. The building literally felt like it was going to fly apart. There was no concept of space or time anymore. You got wrapped up into this Bach cosmic cycle, and it just kept working you phase after phase, and it got deeper and faster, and the voltage higher and higher, and it just wiped everybody out, wiped the whole audience and the organists out. And it was stunning, because when you walked in, all the planets and the moon and the sun and everything were all lined up. And this thing started at sunset.
So 1980.
1980, October 13th, 1980.
13th, 1980.
Yeah.
And it was on top of a hill.
In San Francisco. Grace Cathedral is a duplicated cathedral. It's a 7,200 pipe organ driven by like a 25 horsepower blower.
Wow. So those organs, you can put each one in a place.
You add all the harmonics in space and time, and you can make pressure, you can make entities in that church. The church is built like an Alexanderson antenna. The columns are all loaded. And you have standing wave organs pointed at each other. So you can maneuver these harmonics around in the space and position them. And they have like littler harmonics. They're like ball bearings, like those pictures of atoms. And you build these things into space, and if you're sitting in one of those zones, if you put an altimeter in there, like my altimeter, the thing will go wild.